Before Japan had a name, before empires, samurai, or even cities existed, this land was nothing more than a chain of silent, dark islands rising from the Pacific Ocean. The ground was never still. Mountains carried fire inside them. Heavy rain fell often, and in the mornings, mist settled over the forest like a thin veil. This was not an easy place for humans to survive, but those who stayed learned how to live. The first people who stepped onto these islands were not kings or conquerors. They simply wanted to survive, like early humans everywhere. They hunted, fished, and used whatever nature offered. Today, we know them as the Jomon, people who lived here thousands of years ago, long before many of the world's great civilizations were even born. The Jomon had no great cities, but their lives were not chaotic. They understood the rhythm of the seasons, followed the movement of animals, and knew when to store food and when to use it. What makes the Jomon truly special is not just how old their culture is, but how they saw the world. Nature was not an enemy, it was alive. Trees had spirits, mountains held both anger and calm. The sea gave food, and sometimes took lives. This way of thinking later became the heart of Japanese belief, a world filled with kami, spirits and unseen forces present in everything. The pottery the Jomon created is still breathtaking today. Twisting, flowing patterns as if fire and earth danced together. These were not just tools, they were stories. Stories of people who wanted to leave something behind, even though they had no idea what the future would bring. But no land stays the same forever. Thousands of years later, a new wave of people arrived. They brought with them something that changed everything. Rice with farming, a new era began, the Yayoi period. Rice was more than food. Rice meant land-water control. Once humans learned to shape the land and guide water, they could no longer move freely as before. They became tied to the soil, and the soil became power. Villages formed, food could be stored. Populations grew. And as numbers increased, so did conflict. Who owned the best land? Who controlled the water? Who had the right to decide? This was the moment when inequality and tension first appeared. The peaceful world of the Jomon was fading. Japan was entering an age where power truly mattered. Local leaders began to rise, figures who were both warriors and spiritual mediators. In early Japan, power was never just about strength. A true leader was someone close to the spirits, someone who could maintain balance and order. And this is where legends were born. Stories emerged saying this land was created by the gods themselves. At the center of these myths stood the sun goddess, Amaterasu. It was her light, they said, that gave life to Japan, and the ruling family was believed to descend from her. These myths were more than stories. They became the foundation of authority. When people believed their ruler had divine blood, obedience changed. It was no longer just fear, it became faith. Along this path, Japan slowly entered a new stage, what could be called the birth of a state, the moment when the land truly began to awaken. This era would later be known as the Kofun period. Its most powerful symbols were massive tombs built for rulers, keyhole-shaped burial mounds so enormous they could be seen from the sky, visible from miles away. These tombs sent a clear message: someone ruled here whose power did not end with death. During the Kofun period, iron weapons reached Japan. Contact with neighboring lands, especially China and Korea, grew stronger. Ideas, technology, and culture flowed in from outside, but Japan never accepted them exactly as they were. Everything was adapted, reshaped, and made Japanese. At the same time, political power became more centralized. Alliances of clans formed, creating the core of what would become Japan's central government. The emperor stood as a symbol of unity, even if real executive power was not always absolute, but the greatest transformation was still ahead. With the arrival of Buddhism, the Japanese mind encountered a new world. If Shinto looked outward to nature, Buddhism looked inward to suffering, impermanence, and death. It taught that everything changes, and that attachment is the root of pain. For a people who had lived for centuries with natural disasters, these ideas did not feel foreign. Buddhism spread quickly, especially among the elites, and the imperial court temples were built. Monks gained respect, and philosophy slowly began to shape politics. Around the same time, Japan started learning from China how to govern a state, writing istems, laws, and administrative structures. Yet again, nothing was copied purely. Japan always kept a distance between learning and imitation. This process brought greater stability, but stability does not always mean peace. Behind the curtain of rituals and order, a new class was rising. Men who protected land, lived by the sword, and prepared for battle rather than prayer. They did not yet have a clear name, but they were already shaping Japan's future. Japan's story was slowly shifting, from myth and farming towards steel and real power. From this point on, land was no longer defined only by agriculture, but by force, a kind of power that depended less on prayers and legends and more on the sword. In the shadows of the court and ceremonies, men emerged whose lives were bound to war. They guarded estates, fought for local lords, and lived with death close at hand. Gradually, they gained a name, samurai. The samurai were not just soldiers. They represented a new order, one where power had to walk hand in hand with loyalty. If you protected the land, your life belonged to it. If you swore an oath, breaking it was worse than death. This mindset slowly evolved into what would later be called Bushido, the way of the warrior. During this era, the imperial court still existed. The emperor remained sacred, but real power was quietly slipping away. Governing the country, making military decisions, controlling the land, all of it passed into the hands of powerful warrior families. And this is where Japan entered a new phase, a world with two powers existing at the same time. With the beginning of the Heian period, Japanese culture reached a peak of elegance. The imperial court was filled with poetry, music, painting, and literature. Aristocratic life followed strict rituals and unwritten rules. Beauty mattered. Even the color of clothing or the way a poem was written carried meaning. But this beauty had a cost. The court became so absorbed in refinement that it drifted away from the reality of society. In that distance, the samurai grew stronger every day. They fought on the borders, crushed rebellions, and protected order. This contrast eventually exploded. Civil wars began, military families fought each other for control of the country. Conflict became constant. Out of this chaos emerged the idea of the shogun, the supreme military commander. Officially, the shogun served under the emperor, but in reality, it was the shogun who ruled the country and held true power. Japan entered the age of military governments, an era where order was born from war. Each shogun tried to create stability, but stability was always temporary. Betrayals, short-lived alliances, and bloody battles became part of everyday life. For ordinary people, life was harsh. Farmers suffered under heavy taxes, cities sometimes grew, and sometimes were destroyed and torn apart. Yet within this chaos, Japan developed what would become its greatest strength: inner order. The samurai learned to control their emotions. They accepted fear but did not let it rule them. Death was not an enemy, it was part of the path. This mindset survived even during times of peace and became deeply rooted in Japanese culture. Centuries of war had exhausted Japan. People longed for calm. Eventually, a period began in which the shoguns managed to create a form of relative stability. Strict laws, clear social classes, and tight control over society allowed the country to breathe again and begin anew. But this peace had a price: isolation. Japan chose to close its doors to the world. Contact with foreigners was heavily limited. The goal was to protect order and prevent chaos. This decision kept Japan away from foreign wars, but it also forced the country to grow within a closed world, a world where tradition mattered more than change. During this time, Japanese culture grew deeper. Arts such as no theater, kabuki, calligraphy, and the tea ceremony took shape. Everything carried meaning, even silence. Beauty was found in simplicity. This idea later became known as wabi-sabi, the beauty of impermanence and imperfection. But the outside world did not wait for Japan. When foreign ships appeared on Japan's shores, the country was shaken. The closed world suddenly faced the reality of global powers. Japan realized that if it did not change, it would disappear. This was the moment when old Japan neared its end. But unlike many civilizations, this ending did not lead to total collapse. Instead of resisting, Japan chose to adapt. It took technology from the West, but kept its soul. The samurai disappeared as a class, but their values remained. Loyalty, discipline, respect, and responsibility moved from the battlefield to factories and schools. The emperor returned to the center of attention, this time as a symbol of national unity. Modern Japan was built on the shoulders of old Japan. Nothing happened suddenly. Every step was the result of centuries of experience, failure, and adaptation. When we look back, we see that Japan was never formed easily. This land shook, burned, and was rebuilt again and again, from the Jomon people, who lived in harmony with nature, to the samurai, who made peace with death. Each of them is a piece of the same puzzle. And perhaps that is why Japan today still carries its past with pride, not as a burden, but as a pillar. The story of a country that learned how to stand firm on the most unstable ground and rebuild itself.